Okay, so this is the garter stitch where you're knitting every row. I'll do one more row of knit and then I'll show you the other half of knitting. Basically, it's like two halves, which is purling. So again, I've got my yarn. It's tensioned in my left hand the way I would if I was crocheting, except I'm also holding the needle. And then I have my right needle in my right hand. I'm going into the loop. I'm drawing a loop through a loop, and then I'm pushing it off and going to the next one, loop through a loop, pushing it off, drawing a loop through a loop, loop through a loop, loop through a loop. Here we go. So this is called the knit stitch. And when you knit on the front and you knit on the back, it's called the garter stitch. But what if you don't want to be, see how this side, this was, focus camera up, this was the knit side, and you can see these, I was trying to get a neutral background, so I just have like a binder open in the background, but you can see the V's, right, from the knit stitch. They look like V's of chain stitches because basically we're doing the same motion. But if you go to the other side, this is the back of the knit stitch. You see these bumps. So if you wanted to have a distinct front side and a back side, so that's why if you look at this, right, here are the V's from the previous row. Here are the bumps from the row before that. Maybe I need to pull it a little bit away. Okay, that's better. So if you want to make it so that you have very flat fabric on the front and very bumpy fabric on the back, and you can have a nice clean front side, that is called stockinette stitch. So if the knit stitch, I'm going to knit the first stitch. If the knit stitch is, I take my needle in the front, I go from front to back, and then I bring the yarn from back to front, right? So it's coming out the front like this, right? This loop is coming out the front. A purl stitch is just in reverse. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the front of my left needle, move my right needle to the back of my left needle, right? So the yarn is now in the front, my right needle is now in the back. I'm going to come through, I'm going to hook this yarn and I'm going to take it from back to front. So I've still just pulled a loop through a loop, but instead of pulling the loop from the back to the front, I pulled the loop from the front to the back. So you can see this stitch where I pulled the yarn from back to front, I get a V, and this stitch where I pulled the yarn from front to back, I get a bump. So this is called the purl. Now again, my yarn is in the front, my right needle is in the back. I'm coming in from behind, I'm hooking the yarn and I'm pulling it through. And again, I've pulled the yarn from front to back. So this is called purling. So with purling, usually what I do when I'm doing it by feel is I make contact before the first stitch. Again, because the stitch is oriented so that the right leg is in front, I can just glide it down and through. This part is a little bit trickier because we're kind of tensioned in the other way. So I usually have to make a much more exaggerated sweeping gesture when I am purling than I do when I'm knitting. And the problem with that is sometimes if you're pulling too much, it can mess up your tension on your purling stitches. So you just have to play with it. So usually what I do is I just try to hook it and then sometimes I use my thumb to push it down so it doesn't stretch my stitch out too much. And then I'm actually going to knit this last stitch. The reason being, I'm going to continue the garter stitch pattern just in the first and the last stitches because this type of fabric where I'm knitting the front and I'm purling on the back It's very curly. It curls, the sides curl a lot, which is fine if you're making like a sleeve, which is going to get curled around and stitched anyway, or like a hat, but not so great if you're trying to make something flat like a scarf. So you can see here, or, you know, a swatch, which is what I'm basically working up here. So you can see when I turn this around, I have this set of V's, which was my first knit row, and I have this set of V's, which was my my previous purl row. And now this is the front side of the fabric, so I'm going to knit again. I'm going to knit all the way across. Focus, focus, focus. There we go. And I'm going to knit, 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 knit. Oh, my tension there was a little off. I can feel knit, knit, knit. So I knit every row here, and I have a bunch of V's, which is what the front of a knit stitch looks like. And I'm going to turn around, and I see I have all bumps, so I'm going to purl. So now I'm still going to knit the first and last stitch, so I just have a one column of garter stitches along the edges so that it doesn't curl. So I'm going to knit this first stitch, and then I'm going to kind of rotate. So this is how I am when I'm knitting, and then I just kind of flip it so that the yarn is in the front, the needle's in the back, to purl. Purl, 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 purl. Now, I should probably watch some videos and see how other people who knit continental style, how they do their purling, but I don't know, this is just the method I figured out that works for me. And then my last stitch, instead of purling, I'm just going to switch it so that I'm knitting. I'm going to go in through the front of the loop and draw the yarn in. So now I have here this piece of very flat fabric that's very flat in the front and very bumpy in the back, and this is called stockinette stitch. This is actually what is like t-shirt material. T-shirt material is done on a machine because nobody who would hand knit would be able to deal with thread that small. But if you look at it, like zoom in, it is stockinette stitch. So the front is knit and the back is all purl. So even though we are alternating knitting and purling, typically we call the side with all the V's the knit side, and we call the side with all the bumps the purl side, even though we're knitting and purling alternately as we go back and forth. If you were knitting in the round, so you were making something round on circular needles or double pointed needles, you would never have to purl. You would just be knitting in a spiral. So, and you would achieve the same stockinette stitch look. So this is stockinette stitch. And let's say I'm going to do something that usually knitters don't learn until they've become quite a bit more advanced. But as crocheters, we kind of have a superpower. What if you do the dreaded beginner mistake and you drop a stitch? So I'm going to purposefully drop this stitch. Maybe you accidentally pushed 2 stitches off and you didn't notice, and then you just keep going till the end. This is a problem in knitting because every stitch is connected to the 2 stitches next to it and the stitch directly above and below. This stitch that I dropped has nothing to connect to above, and so it will start to run. Like you literally get, like you get a run in your stockings. It will run. So it'll come unraveled all the way down, and you'll get this ladder. You'll get these ladders just like you would in like a pair of pantyhose. Now, if you're a knitter and you have no experience with crochet, you might freak out. But if you are a crocheter, never fear. All you have to do is, I'm just going to slip these stitches until I got to the point where I dropped my stitch. So here's where I dropped my stitch. And all you're going to do is you're going to stick your crochet hook in this loop. And then you're going to just chain stitch up. So I'm going to, okay, I'm holding on to too many things and I can't look at the camera at the same time. So I'm going to just chain stitch one here. I'm going to, and this is just literally like a chain stitch motion. So it's very easy if you already have experience crocheting. And then you can see I don't really have, blurry. I don't really have space, but because knitting is all connected, I can just sort of squeeze it in there, put this stitch back on my needle, and then I will slip these back so they're all on the same needle. So I do have, it's a little bit tight because there wasn't really room for it, but knitting is forgiving enough that I can kind of stretch it and spread it and kind of mess with it, and I can adjust, you know, it'll work out. You will barely be able to see. This loop is a little bit smaller than the rest because there wasn't enough tension, but I can always, there's a little bit of slack here, so I can always pull it here and then kind of give myself a little slack here. So that's the nice thing about being able to crochet and having all these crochet hooks, is you already have your tools that you need to doctor your knitting if you make mistakes. So this is stockinette stitch, this was garter stitch, and if you know how to knit and you know how to purl, you can also do a lot of other textured stitches, which are just alternating knit and purl in different ways. So if you do kind of like a 1x1 checkerboard, so you knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, and then on the other side you knit, purl, like you knit into where there's a purl and you purl where there's a knit, you'll end up with like a very bumpy looking piece of fabric, and that's called the seed stitch. And then if you do columns of knit and columns of purl, and you're alternating columns of knit versus purl, that's called ribbing. So you get these ribs. So ribbing is used a lot for cuffs on sleeves or on socks or brims of hats, things like that. And yeah, there are probably much better knitting videos out there that can help you with a lot of those other nuances. I mostly wanted to show you the crochet cast on. In order to get that full elasticity, I do like to chain double the amount of knit stitches I need and then just pick up in every other chain. And then also how to hold the yarn if you are doing it continental style, which I think is probably the closest to how you do it in knitting. So I'll stop this video here. My tensioning was a little off because I was talking and watching the camera and working at the same time, and apparently I'm not used to doing that. So I will stop the video here. Maybe I'll make one final video.